IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
With Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 1013 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
With Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 1013 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
With Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 1013 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all of these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how
To the ISM, H to the ISO talk show. In my humble opinion, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us right about now. Sir Charles, A.A. Ron, Miss Max, Razor, the whole gang's here. The gang's here, A.A. Ron.
Been a long time. We shouldn't have left you.
You know it. So yeah, family, you know how to reach us. And tell a friend. You're in those breaks, 434-422-9101, as well as IMHO talk show online. We are streaming worldwide right now. Thank you if you're listening in the listening area. Quick attitude check. Hey, Ron.
I'm doing well, and there's a brother in an igloo in Antarctica that's listening right now. Shout out to you, bro.
Look, if you forgot, we have guests here. We haven't introduced y'all yet. We have guests. So that's Razor, let's behave, Razor. What about you? How are you, Razor?
Hey, man, I'm glad to finally be back, man. I missed y'all.
Big talk, yeah, man. Let's see. Do we got the Queen on the line? Queen, is that you?
I'm here. I don't know how good my sound is. But
hold on. You see how Max came in with the little Beyonce laugh? Oh, excuse me. How y'all doing?
I'm back, stitches.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
Yeah, so first off, like my little bit of good news, y'all, and see what y'all got. But this was a busy weekend, and we kind of post COVID, and more things change, the more they stay the same. So we have this special today where we're calling our Charlottesville housing crisis, right? But before we get into that nitty gritty, though, I want to shout out our people. I want to shout out our people this weekend for having such beautiful turnout and seeing just so much love out there in the community. Man, there's so many events going on. Pretty sure y'all know our listening voice has heard or attended and participated in some of it. Chiamba is back. Post-COVID first, it's the 31st year. They were back. We had new businesses showing up, new activities showing up. But the one, though, that did my heart really, really good, because y'all know me, Razor, Max. I love my people, but I know my people. And when I heard DC was bringing 3 busloads to Tulsa, like I said, I love my people, but I know my people. But guess what? It was beautiful. So proud of y'all, man. That turnout was jam-packed. Shouts out to the whole Tulsa League. That was a beautiful last night. I'm over at Tonsler Park. So wanted to kind of set the mood, y'all, break the ice a little bit, but we are already joined by our guests. So like I said, tell a friend, don't want to miss it. Because the end of the show, we are going to have your mayor, Cville Mayor, Lloyd Snook is supposed to join us. So, family, you know how we do. We're going to keep it real. And then middle of the show, second hour, we're going to have from far, Cville, we're going to have Miss Shelby Edwards. She's going to be back with us. But to kick it off, Miss Max, we do have guests with us already. So how about we get into it?
All right, sounds good.
All right. So we have Miss Colette Sheehy. Miss Colette, how are you today?
I'm doing okay. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you for joining us. And we have my brother that's no stranger to Cville or to these airwaves as well, Mr. Harold Foley. How you doing this afternoon?
Good morning, good afternoon, and what it do?
That's right. And so glad y'all can join us. We're gonna try to leave no stone unturned as I'm over here pushing buttons. No stone unturned, because this is a serious issue. And so the fact that that Harold and Colette are here with us today to kick off this discussion on behalf of the advisory board that the UVA has put together, and Colette's roots run even deeper in her position at UVA. So everybody knows they call it the town in the gown, Colette. That's one of the terms. The town in the gown. So there's so much division, and when we talk about housing, that is one of the things where a lot of fingers get pointed, but there's a lot of people trying to do the work. And so here we're trying to have the real discussion and see how the community can be involved and see how we can push this needle forward. So Colette, first, for those who aren't familiar with your work, I think I did an okay job introducing you, but go ahead and further present yourself so folks kind of know your part within UVA and housing.
Okay. Thanks. Well, thanks for having me today. Appreciate it. I'm Colette Sheehy. I'm the Senior Vice President for Operations and State Government Relations at the University of Virginia. While not a Charlottesville native, I have lived here for 40 years and worked for the university that entire time. And I am one of a group of people at the university working on our affordable housing initiative, which was kicked off actually in 2019 by President Ryan and delayed somewhat because of COVID as well. But we can get into that, and I can tell you about that.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thank that team, because for better or for worse, the new leadership there, seem to be making the efforts, so, and of course, the best way to make that change is for the community to hold accountable, right?
Sure.
Absolutely. So Harold, yes. I know most people know you, but go ahead and let them know about that advisory board, right? Because you're one of the many members that's on the UVA Affordable Housing Advisory Group, right?
Yes, so I'm on Affordable Housing Advisory Group, but I'm also on the initial working group that John Ryan came together in 2018. And we came together to figure out how to incorporate UVA and the town together without having rifts, right? So for so long, UVA has been the castle on the hill that we don't, didn't tend to go to the bubble, right? UVA is in their own bubble, they do their own thing. But I think Jim Ryan came as like, hey, how can I make UVA a better community person and look out for the community, also making sure that the school can be driving in the right direction and working together. So, the advisory group, I love those folks from there. It was kind of rough from the beginning, but, I think anytime you have change, positive or negative, it's kind of one of those things that you had to figure it out and figure people out. So, Colette is one of those folks I think is got a wealth of information that can be shared about what we're trying to do too. And so that's one thing I love about it, because the team is amazing.
Okay, that's good to hear. Now, Harold, if it comes from you, community just heard you say that, so your word is bond in Charlotte.
Oh, I know. I already know.
Yeah. All right, so in saying that, so Colin, I heard you say that that you wanted to get into like how sort of things are set up within your office. You get back to it in just a minute. So go ahead and let us know, like, as far as your your office, right, and you know, and exactly what it does and like what it's seeing in Charlottesville as far as the role that it plays. You know, when it comes to housing and just affordability, you know, and if I'm off in any way where you say that's not part of my wheelhouse, please let me know. But yeah, but as far as from your perspective, wanted to give our listeners an understanding of the direction we're going as far as sort of your job duties and what you're seeing that needs to be tackled when it comes to affordability.
Okay. So I guess my portfolio includes all of the construction that the university does, facilities management, managing the buildings and grounds, all the construction, as well as what we call auxiliary enterprises, which are self-supporting operations. And that includes student housing, among other things. So, so we are wrestling as an institution now with, I mean, we have for years, how do we house students on grounds? How many students do we house on grounds? And there is a kind of parallel initiative with affordable housing internally to the university. And that is the desire to house all of our second year students in on-grounds housing, which, you know, I think the ripple effect of that will obviously impact the rental market in the community or in and around the university proper. So we are in the middle of studying how we can actually do that. That's not going to be an easy lift for UVA. We figured that we have to add probably 2,500 more beds of housing for students in order to be able to make second year housing mandatory. So we would have all first years housed on grounds and all second years as well. At the same time, we don't want to totally disenfranchise our third and fourth years, because when you speak about affordability, I mean, that's a big deal for a lot of our students. I mean, generally people think, well, you know, the UVA students are wealthy, they can afford, you know, these nice apartments that have pools and amenities on West Main, but there's a good number and a growing proportion of our student population that can't afford that kind of rent. And so when you live on grounds, it's a more reasonable rent. You only have to have a 9-month lease instead of a 12-month lease, like out in the private sector. So there are advantages to living in university-owned housing.
Right. So hearing you saying that, so then, you know, Harold, you may want to chime in here too. So, and I know that the President Ryan has released a statement as far as some initiatives that he has in regards to a renovation, like to help with the homeless issue, for instance. But like, so how are we addressing the residential issue, right, of the city population, knowing that the university has growth as well, right? Because it does go hand in hand, and we see that long history between the university and the city, town and gown. So I'm curious, like when you talk about that growth, like what's the conversation, or how, you know, how is, as you mentioned yourself, like how is the affordability for the rent of others being affected or being considered?
Well, the project, the Affordable Housing Project initiative that the university has is, you know, back in 2019, actually, the president announced that the university would contribute the land on which private developers could build 1,000 to 1,500 units of affordable housing. Right. And then COVID came in 2020 and everything shut down, and we've been kind of delayed in getting restarted, but we did restart in the spring of 2021. Harold and I are both on the working group. Harold's on the advisory group with others. And we're marching along. We hired an outside consultant. I think it's important to say, first of all, the university knows absolutely nothing about affordable housing. We've learned a lot in the last year or more, but at least we recognized that we didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, we brought in the right
So we hired a consultant, Gina Merritt, and she's been helping us. She's listened to the needs of the community. We've done surveys, we've done online comment walls, and we are now at the point where we've issued a request for qualifications for developers. We have 3 sites. 2 of them have gone out. One is on 10th and Wurtland. The other is actually our Piedmont housing development, which is university owned right now. And we use it for faculty and staff housing, kind of temporary housing. But both of those sites are on the table now. So we're taking, I think it's Tuesday is the deadline for the developers to make their letters of interest, say, or their letters of qualification. What we'll do then is sort through those. Don't know how many proposals we'll get, but we'll probably shortlist a number of firms that we think are most qualified and offer kind of the best package, so to speak.
Yeah. So I'm curious, is there any initiative for minority developers, minority-owned companies, or at least developers like that have the experience of dealing with a dynamic like Charlottesville?
So you're talking about another. So the working group has been working on it. I'm talking about Jim Ryan working group, and I think Jim Ryan came out we'll be coming out with a statement. But I know we're going to be looking for minority and women businesses when it comes to starting all this construction stuff. When it comes to even having folks, because when you do construction, you're going to have meetings, so maybe even catering and stuff. So I'm thinking about how the Black community that was fractured at the beginning of the, in the middle century, with the removal of Vinegar Hill, how can we rebuild the Black community in Charlottesville that is leaving so fast, right? Yeah. And I think with this initiative that UVA is doing, this is a great opportunity to think folks to think about even removing dirt, right? Because they're going to need people to remove dirt from these sites, right? So, if you can think about what it is all into construction and everything, folks, think about how you can start your business now, right? I'm the type of person who, when I break the ceiling, I want everybody to come up the ceiling with me, right? And so, never in the history at UVA had this ever happened, right? And so I hear a lot of people say, oh gosh, this is whatever, they ain't doing whatever, right? But, if you know anything about ships, right? If you are in sea and you need to turn around, you can't turn that ship around just like that, right?
Yeah. And
so UVA is that ship that's trying to turn around. And we halfway there now, right? And I can say we because I believe that this can happen. But also, folks, UVA is not the problem of this affordable housing altogether, right? Right. We got to look at the city, the county, right, and the state, because everybody contributes to this BS that we have now in affordable housing. And so,
Can I ask y'all a question?
Yes.
Can I ask y'all a question? Just going back a little bit to what the young lady had said about. I just got a question. She had mentioned that the pandemic delayed what we were doing for the affordable housing. With the construction. Did it delay the construction that was going on for the students as well?
No. So when she said delayed, she was talking about the process of getting everything together. So when she's
but she also said that y'all were trying to look for what you were doing for the second and third year students.
That's something else. That was something else.
It did delay that initiative as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a comment. I'm sorry, Razor, were you finished?
Yeah, Max.
Yeah, I'm finished because I'm gonna have to get her before the show get over. But I'm
so
he playing with fire.
I certainly don't want to speak for the Black population of Charlottesville at large, but I've at least heard what I might call a general consensus that everyone recognizes that there's a housing crisis in the city of Charlottesville, and a lot of the Black community feels like when you talk about the housing crisis, there are a lot of people that are put ahead of their community when it comes to figuring out a solution for that. And the program or the project that you all are talking about sounds really good on the a surface level. Obviously, it's what the city wants and needs. I think that the major concern, though, is that there's a few. the city ends up with a lot of developers who come in and find what they might refer to as loopholes in terms of implementing affordable housing into their projects. And what I mean by that is that they're required to designate so many units for affordable housing. But that begs the question of what is affordable, right? And we may be talking about two different definitions if we're comparing what's affordable for a UVA student who can afford a higher rent, or a UVA student who a landlord is more susceptible to rent to, or a UVA student who has access to a loan or a grant or a program that would help them to cover their rent, versus someone who might be eligible for, let's say, a Section 8 voucher, who landlords might be a little more skeptical of, or a low-income person who is out here hustling and bustling every single day, who has the income, but they got that one thing working against them that they can't change, which is being Black. And so the landlord is even more skeptical of whether or not they're going to be a good tenant. And so I think that's the crux of the concern when it comes to the Black community is what is truly affordable to the Black community, or the low income population of Black community. Will these landlords rent to them? Will these developments actually be for the truly low income? Will the AMI match the income rate of the truly low income population? And then how is UVA, if it recognizes and understands how student housing impacts housing for the greater Charlottesville area, if it recognizes that, then how is it teetering all of that in order to not only secure housing for students, but also for the most vulnerable population of the city of Charlottesville?
Did you take note, Harold? You got that?
No, so just want to say, and I know Carla can clean it up, but it was written, everything you write. Sometimes when you don't put it in writing how you want, what you want, then things do get blurred, right? But I think from the beginning, we knew that there is a problem with developers coming in doing that. And so in our RFQ, is that right? It is written that you have to be a certain way in doing your development. So Carla, can you go ahead and
Yeah, first of all, I want to make sure that the audience understands that this housing is not for UVA students.
No.
It's definitely not. It doesn't, not in any way. Some have also asked, well, are you going to give preference to UVA employees? And they are not going to get preferential treatment either. I mean, it's really, the housing would be open to the community, first of all, even though we have our own employees who are lower income and could use that kind of housing.
Yeah.
But what we did is we did not, and this is a question we get all the time, how are you defining affordability? And we specifically chose not to define it because what we are looking for, first of all, the RFQ does say we want the most affordable housing in the development as possible. But we recognize that a developer has to be able to make money too, right? I mean, we're not like Piedmont Housing that does, low income. So it's definitely going to be a mixed income range, I believe. But we really want the most creative proposals possible from these developers. And the more affordability that's in the proposal, the more creative they can be, the more financing they bring to the table, I think will allow them to score higher in the evaluation, and hopefully we'll pick somebody who can deliver all of that. Yeah. But it will not be just the low income. It will be a mix, and there is likely to be some market rate housing in it as well, because the market rate housing is what supports the lower income housing.
Yeah, I know Aaron has something too. He has
Hey, can I
interesting
throw
perspective.
in a comment really quick? So just real quick, based off of your response. So the housing will then have to be subsidized by the city or the state, and then will the units that are subsidized have a term on them? So they may be subsidized for the next 8-10 years, but after that they could go up to market rate rent, which again eliminates people being able to afford them.
Right. Well, we've talked to a lot of people in the community, and that is something that we've been warned about, that we need to make the affordable housing sustainably affordable, through, in other words, what you just said is not to make the affordability expire after a certain period of time.
Right.
So we'll be looking for that.
Are we using the AMI?
Yeah.
Yes.
If so,
30%. We definitely using 30%.
30% of whose?
Huh?
Of who?
30% of whose? That's
evaluated?
almost like when y'all talk about like middle class. Like
no,
middle class doesn't include. I'm gonna just say people of color. So if we talk about 30% as a whole, like I'm a business owner, I can write off thousands and thousands of dollars to make it look like I only make so much money. So at that point, if I fit a certain criteria, that's that loophole that I believe Max was talking about. So if y'all not using, that's things that we're not talking about. So when what I would like not to happen is that the good intentions leave people of Charlottesville can't see the forest for the trees. So they see a lot of work going on, they see a lot of meetings, but they don't see the crust of what actually can happen. Because if you tell me that I have to meet to where I'm only making X amount of dollars and I'm a business developer or business owner, or like some of the other shows that we have that talk about purchasing land use around here, I can write off more than half of what I make to fit what needs to be fit. So if y'all don't put in that kind of criteria to keep them out, it's going to be the same old thing, just packaged a different way.
Yeah, no, Rizan, I totally understand it. And Colette can tell you, I am in that room saying, people who make under 60,000 got to be in this space. They got to have these
60,000 making or 60,000 claimed.
I said
that's two
anybody
different
make it. I'm saying anybody make 60,000 and under. So with me, I have been privileged to know that you have to, when you making that less money, you have to show how much money you making. You have to show your assets. And most people who make that less money don't have that much in bank accounts. Don't have that much in access at all, right? So it's going to be easy to know who making that 30% M&I, whatever that is.
AMI.
Yeah, whatever the acronym is. But so I'm always in the room, excuse the French, kicking ass. Because I don't want
Harold keeps us honest.
That's right.
Let's do it.
I don't want this to be something that's going to be for the rich, right? I know, you know what I'm saying? I'm born and raised in Charlottesville. I see one of the areas that we are developing was where my great grandmother lived, right? And UVA has that. Believe me, I'm in the room with so much emotion. Sometimes I had to shut my camera off, right? So and I think that's the good thing about it is UVA is willing to bring in people who have lived experience to say, hey, wait a minute. You see what happened, exactly what you're saying, Richard. You see what happened with these developers and what they do. And so we are more conscious about it, right? We even got, some housing folks helping us or helped us write the RFQ who knew that you got to put in 30%, right? And I fight for it. I will fight for it to the end of my life because those are my people who are struggling.
Yeah. Isn't that what Mayor Walker was trying to get through too, if I recall correctly? Because a lot of pushback at council, there's something that we'll bring up with the mayor later in the show. But as I recall, when especially Dairy Market, like as we see now, there's these new luxury condos back there.
Yep.
And if I recall, Mayor Walker was trying to say, hey, you gotta have a subsidy if y'all, you can make money. I understand developers got to make money, but there still needs to be an affordability, put in place by you getting this business. So is that one of the initiatives to make that a requirement to say you can make money off this development, but then we also need to keep in mind, that there needs to be, affordable rent with this.
Right, and Charles, one of the obviously one of the subsidies that the university is making, while not cash, is the value of the land. Right, so land is expensive in Charlottesville City and in Albemarle County, and so the developer will not have to pay for the land and won't have to factor the cost of that into his financial model.
Okay, everyone, financial.
I have a you're taking in all this information, and I have a little bit of a comment because I'm in banking, I'm a mortgage advisor, but one of the issues, and I see people talking about affordable housing all the time, and Harold had said something that struck a chord with me, and I want to put it on a broad scale, is that when we talk about this problem, the main thing, and I'm talking specifically for black people that are living in these communities, all these processes, all these meetings, all these plans are always discussed. The process of taking the land, the process of removing the people from the land, there weren't all these processes involved. It was very, very quick. Redlining was very, very quick. Removing land was very, very quick. So the frustration from the community is that it's always a process, but the process for his grandmother to be evicted and removed from that property was not this, it wasn't this long drawn out thing. And that's where the community is coming from, because this is affecting our seniors. It affects your labor market and the whole, we have to wait. We have the community. We got this, we got that. I'm in banking. I saw where they used to be able to write, the government does what they want to do. Don't let people fool you. They wrote things on deeds and all of a sudden you couldn't live there. People want to know what are ways that we can really, truly improve these processes, because housing is an issue that people are living with every single day. I'm not sure people have talked about it, and everybody knows here, I'm a huge advocate for Black males. Black male homelessness is absolutely out of control. Globally, but specifically in urban markets here in the United States of America. These are issues that cannot go through processes. So I understand how when you say turn that ship, it's kind of hard. The problem is when they was getting the ship rolling, they didn't wait that long.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing. This where sometimes I get frustrated with people, right? I'm gonna be honest with you. We can talk about this stuff that was twined up together. We try to unravel that stuff so we can have a better place, right? And sometimes when you unravel it, you know, it's like taking the layers of an onion. Gosh, it's another funky part, right? And so, I just want to say something. No, I got you. Yeah, I got you. Yes. But what I think people don't understand is it is a process to unravel what the government and state did over those years, right? And what I'm trying to do is, I'm not trying to come here to say we're going to have this perfect thing. UVA itself cannot solve the housing problem, right? What I'm saying is there is different entities that can solve it all together, right? That's what I'm want to move to, and I don't want to keep talking about. I just want to move forward.
No, and I think that you're misconstruing what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I understand the processes. The problem is there, and you know where I'm coming from. There's a level of seriousness from the people that are involved in making these decisions to where everybody, even the layman's person, knows how serious we are. So I know you're sitting in those rooms. Harold, you know for a fact, we don't need another meeting about this. This is a decision that can be made. We don't need another committee about this. There's a level, all I'm saying, I understand that. But for the grandmothers and the people that are living in some of these substandard housing that are getting affected by environmental conditions, they don't have time for a process.
Can we hear from Paulette?
But I'm just, if Paulette is here, and I'm not attacking anybody. What I'm saying is that it's good to see tangible things moving forward, but the community wants to see that things are serious. And it's hard for them, from our perspective, to get a gauge on how serious it is, because they've heard this rhetoric before. And I think that's something that has to be taken into consideration, not just by you guys from the board, but from the planners, the contract, everybody. Like, listen, we have to feel that this is a priority because we, as Black people, it is never a tangible benefit. It's always a thought about benefit. It's always a this or that, but it's never something tangible that we can feel. Does that make sense?
It makes a whole lot of sense because I'm Black. I understand that, right? And I'm in the room saying
I
that.
understand that.
But this the thing, people don't see it because they don't see what's happening.
But they see tangible pain every day. So we're on the same page.
Yeah, we on the same page, and I understand that. But in order to heal that pain, you got to understand. I know we've been in this real messed up era, right? And in the 40s, they came with the housing thing that really destroyed everything, right? They created suburbs for white folks and then say, we're going to think about whatever, right? So and if you think about 1940, how long was that?
Not that long.
That's right.
Yeah. So people still alive.
So even what they said, when Jim Ryan got on, right? Before that, I'm being honest with you, it was some horrible presidents before that, right? We had Teresa Sutherland, who wrote a thesis about why we should give people a living wage, who came in there and wouldn't give people a living wage, right? So what we have now, we have someone who is an agent of change, who's trying to change the whole situation that UVA has done for years, for taking land, for taking people jobs, for doing whatever, right? But just the thing, Colette and I talk about this in the group. People need to see it, right, to believe it, right? And once we start moving dirt in a year or so, people are going to see it. That's where I'm at.
How do you
not to diminish your work or anything like that?
Not at all,
Harold, because I definitely
it's good debate. This is what we're supposed to do.
Right. But for real, it's like you need some dogs with you.
Oh yeah, I got some.
How these systems work. I don't know who all is in the room.
Yeah. Oh yeah, believe me, I got some.
Yeah, they do.
Some big dogs with me too. Who actually, I can't reveal it, but one of the people, the reason why we put 30% in the RFQ is because one of my big dogs said we got to have it in there, and we worked it in there. So believe me, there's some folks in there who is like, they don't believe for real. They don't believe in the process, right? They believe in me. And they believe that I want this to change, and so they helping me change this.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, you can go on the UVA website. Like there's the affordable housing section, and it does list all the advisory group members. So to that point too, we're almost at the end of the hour, so we might as well push through and wrap it up. But like to your point though. Harold and Colin would love to hear what you say though. So you have folks who see the surplus at UVA. Like, let's be very transparent about it. Like, folks know. So it's very hard. Or like, what's your answer? Is the best way for me to put this. Like when you get that question of when people see the bountiful resource of UVA, but there's still all these obstacles. Like, how do we answer that? Like, how do we keep and I don't want to say keep the community at ease, because that's not the goal. But how can we answer that honestly and to help people understand when there's an honest effort, when they see how the surplus is high as it's ever been?
So keep it real.
That's not our surplus. I think that's the state surplus.
Yeah, the state surplus. But for real, keep bringing us on, because knowledge is what we put out our mouth, right? And I think for so long, when we started this initiative in 2018, we were so excited because in 2019, we was going to start the housing initiative, right? COVID happened, right? But COVID exposed a lot of stuff in the system that is not right, right? And I hope people will remember the affordable housing, healthcare, childcare, everything that what poor people had to deal with was extremely high volume, right? But with that said, one thing for sure is keep the word out, because we, Colette and the group, we trying to figure out how to get this out, right? We come on shows, we went on a lot of shows. So we want to continue to do that because we know people don't see it, they don't believe it, right? But once
I'm sorry.
That show and dirt in, then I think people are going to understand it more.
Harold, one of the problems that with that statement, and it's not at you, is the fact of, like you said, we will invite y'all, but the people that y'all are trying to help are also this station And our community is also some of the last people that y'all stop, not you, but UVA stops to tell what's going on. So that doesn't make sense to me. The people that I'm trying to help is also the last people. You'll go to all these other radio entities to tell what's going on, and then we'll happen to stop down there at UVA, at 101 Jams, and then get on the radio station to say, like, you just said, you just said y'all went on several radio stations.
I'm gonna push back on you because I'm a true organizer, and Colette can tell you. When I started hearing what y'all was saying a year ago, we came up with a game plan to go and set, well, because I was in a meeting with a city council member who was giving misinformation about what we were doing, right? And that triggered me to say, hey, we need to get the real information out there. So we came up with this plan, right? I think, I don't know if somebody reached out to you all, but somebody wanted to come on the show. Did she come on the show?
Who, from which sector?
No, okay. So we do have a media plan, right? We have a plan to not only talk to, the white radio stations, but get into all the Black areas, because we know most of the people who are affected by this is Black and brown.
Right.
We know this.
Yes.
Right?
What are y'all next steps? As far as what the community needs to know, that the goals, the tasks that's being tackled right now, and of course how the community can be supportive.
I'm gonna shoot this back to you. How can we do that? Because we have been trying. Like we got a Facebook page, we got Instagram, we've been on shows, we've been on news, but how do we really let folks know that this is possible? This is going to happen, right? This is nothing that is like, oh well, this is something we wrote and we're gonna put on the shelf. We actually are working now trying to find, people to do the development, right? But this the other thing too. We can get caught up in, this is that and that to the third. But one thing for sure, when it do happen, when that dirt go into the ground, we need Black businesses, right? We need somebody to move that dirt. We need somebody to feed people, right? And this is coming in the next year or so. Right.
Yeah, and so that's my question to you: is that the community, the listeners that are listening, like who do they reach to get involved and stay involved and to keep, like their word into what the planning is? Like
they can reach out to me, and I'm a great community connector, right? Okay. I mean, I get calls every day about something that somebody needs, right? And I don't mind connecting. You know that, right? Absolutely. So I don't mind connecting people, right? But, I think people got to get out that way and understand that this is a new era for UVA, right? This is not the 300 years before, right? And this is the man in the top who's moving this. This is Jim Ryan. And the thing about Jim Ryan, people don't know, Jim Ryan lived in Charlottesville before he became the president, right? He understands the nuance of Charlottesville, right?
He was a civil rights attorney.
That's right. So he understands that the BS that's happening shouldn't be happening.
Yeah. So, Colin, I want to give you the last word and sort of your closing comments to the listeners. Thank you for joining us. But we did have a message from. We got a bunch of messages. So just real quick, because we are pressed up against the hour. But Sabrina, there's opportunities that PHA to be a indirect partnership, right, with PHA. So if we talk about affordable, there really should be the tier of criteria if they do not qualify for PHA. The next step should be affordable housing. Do you think the gap between the quote unquote affordable housing programs are too broad? So that was a question. Do you feel the gap between?
I'm not sure I know enough about that to answer that question. I mean, obviously, there are organizations, nonprofits in Charlottesville that target different aspects of affordable housing. Right? PHA does rental. Habitat is more, home ownership, that kind of thing. So I think
that's why it's Shelby.
And the one thing that we've learned is that the community is very interested in the income ladder or the housing ladder, from rental all the way to home ownership. The first two properties we've put out there, they will be rental units. But the later one, North Fork, which is going to come a little bit later, has the opportunity for home ownership as well. And just as kind of closing what we've got, so we are out in the market on the RFQ. We'll shortlist those firms. We would hope that by the end of the calendar year, December 2022, we would have a selected developer for the project, or developers for the project.
Gotcha.
And we are always updating our website too, so folks can look there. And then in terms of community engagement, part of what the developer's responsibility will be is to do a very robust process of community engagement once they have once they're on the site and developing the plan for that site.
Yeah, someone just made that comment online too, as far as to make sure that you are in the communities, right? Like some of the maybe the meetings or the outreach actually go into the community, sparking that conversation as well. And of course, this is one platform for you. Definitely appreciate y'all being here. It's real conversation. Hopefully a lot of questions were answered. Then a lot of folks didn't even know that there was a specific affordable housing initiative that UVA had undertaken. So, so definitely applaud that. Now we just got to keep it moving forward.
That's right.
And like I said, y'all go to that website because Harold is not alone, and when it comes to those who are respected and trusted within the community. So as he said, send your ideas, stay in communication with them. So Max, Razor, Aaron, anything else in closing?
No, that's it from me. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on and talking to us. Hope to have you back as the project progresses.
No, I appreciate the dialogue. And like I said, it's a team effort. And like I said, we just want everybody, and we know that you guys in here are going to take this serious, and we're definitely going to continue to hold you guys to the fire to fight for the right initiatives.
Yeah, definitely want to thank y'all for coming on here. It's just one of those things that when you see something that resembles the pain and trauma that you've been going through for so long, you're not going to wait till somebody keeps stepping on your foot. So that's all we're doing here at IMHO, is making sure that people understand that we don't want any smoke and mirrors. If the dirt needs to be moved, move the dirt.
And I'm going to say this, I'm honored to be here with y'all, and I thank y'all so much, and I appreciate what y'all do, getting the voice out to the community. So peace and love.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Look forward to continuing talking to you.
Wasn't too bad. You did good.
Yeah.
First radio? That was your first one?
No.
Oh, see, you fooled us. There you go.
Yeah, I've actually done I've done others on this topic, but
we live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, Black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More Black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that Black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially Black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, I am. Did you go to the boule? I didn't see you at the boule.
No, I was not. My job is English. You just don't understand. They put me.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
Here, Colin.
Charles, you want to sit right here?
Oh.
Go down here. Right?
Yep, yes, you'll be at that mic.
Yeah.
And then,
Don't touch it.
I guess you and Razor, you and I still.
Yeah, I'm good.
So, Razor, if you doing virtual, you standing here.
I stand. Okay. What's her job?
Do you need me to?
She's the far.
You need me to cut mine off? Is it messing up bandwidth?
Oh, okay.
You mean is it?
Yeah,
messing with your bandwidth?
It's not messing with bandwidth, but I mean, if you're not on, they can turn it off.
See, we didn't have time for me to say what I wanted to say to him.
Harold?
Yeah.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show.
Opinion. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor, AA Ron, and the booth in the building. How you doing, Miss Max? I think she there somewhere with us.
She don't like you.
Razor, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good.
Are you here?
You see what he just did?
Hey, come on, man.
Hey, man. Who was that rocking?
Hey, Ron, ready for the second hour?
Jim.
Shelby, I'm sorry.
Where you get the money?
Shelby, please come back and see us, please. But as promised, family, tell a friend, because we are still here for this talk. The special today. Three top-notch guests. We had Harold Foley and Colette Sheehy of UVA Housing and the UVA Affordable Housing Advisory Group. And we are expected to be joined by the Cville mayor himself, Lloyd Snook, in the last hour. And right now, we are joined by our friend, our sister. She's back with us talking about Shelby Edwards. Shelby, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Blessed to be here. Hopefully we can be a blessing to our people continually. So proud of your work. So as we said, there is a housing crisis going on right now. But there's so many facets to it, right? Like when we look at the like the income gaps and disparities that play a part, we see how the university plays a part. There's so many folks from different backgrounds need to be taken care of. But for those that aren't aware, let the folks know about your work over at FAR and, like sort of what your mission is right now.
Of course. So my name is Shelby. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm the executive director of the Charlottesville Public Housing Association of Residents, also known as FAR.
That's right.
FAR's mission is to educate and empower low-income residents in the city of Charlottesville. And we do that in 4 main ways. The first one is our FAR internship program. Is a paid civic engagement opportunity. The second is a resident-led housing redevelopment, which I'm sure we're going to get into later in this conversation. We also have community organizing, which is our bread and butter, is making sure that the people being affected are playing a role in the solutions we come up with. And then the fourth aspect is called Residents for Respectful Research, also known as R3. And that's one of the newer aspects of FAR. But pretty much when larger organizations like UVA come into the neighborhoods, we want to make sure we have residents that are trained to be able to have dialogue about, like, is this effective? Does this impact my community in a positive way? Things like that. So that's a quick summation of what FAR is and the programs we have.
Got you. Nice. Well, if you don't mind, and to kick it off as a little icebreaker, we had a listener or a viewer that asked a question during the first hour. And then everybody in the room was like, that's the question for Shelby.
Oh my goodness. Is it? Okay. What's the question about?
So what Sabrina asked online, well, she heard our conversation about the affordable housing, and she actually mentioned PHA, but she said there's opportunities that PHA could be an indirect partner, right? But she said when we talk about affordable, there really should be tiers, right, and criteria for the people who do not qualify for PHA guidelines. So she's saying that the next step should be for affordable housing. Do you think that there's a difference, that there's a gap between the quote unquote affordable housing programs? Is it too broad? She gave an example. She said some they make too much to qualify, PHA, but not enough to apply for housing. It's very similar for the middle class that don't get any help, but can't afford anything in the middle. I know that was a lot. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts. On
there you go. Icebreaker. Let's get it.
So my main, I'm not even going to say issue, but I'm going to say the number one opportunity in Charlottesville is about defining affordability. And that is something that we have not done in a way that we need to. And so for me, affordable means that the people that I serve are able to afford it, which that means for someone, if you're not bringing in a lot of money, that means you can afford to stay there. That means if you're only bringing in $1,800 a month, you can afford to live. But there are some places in Charlottesville where it costs $1,800 to stay for a 1-bedroom or a studio.
Facts.
And I think that until we focus on improving the amount of housing stock for people between 0 to 30% of the AMI, which let me go on a quick tangent.
Please.
So for those of you listening who are not necessarily familiar with a lot of the lingo, you might hear the phrase AMI, which that stands for Area Median Income. And that is how a lot of HUD programs try and define what affordable housing means. But if you look at the amount of housing stock or like the amount of different opportunities where people can live, there is not that many for people who are deeply low income, which is why FAR's mission really does focus on people who are between 0 to 30% of the AMI, 0 to 50% folks who are in that lower range.
Gotcha. Thank you for that information. So, so when you look at your work at FAR in particular, and when you look at how like the role that the city plays, because one of the questions that came in is that like there's different agencies that the city has that seem to be working together, and of course they get funding from the city, right? But people question the effectiveness like of the agency, like so when you look, because I know you have a board, but when you think about like the watchdog, so to speak, to make sure that that the agencies are supposed to take care of our say low income population or even the homeless population that's looking for places. Like who do you think holds them accountable or should hold them accountable? Because I get you have a board, but then there's the connection to the city. So when you put that dynamic together, how do you feel that's working? Where's the accountability?
Well, I think the accountability begins with all of the folks that live in the city of Charlottesville. And of course, we appreciate the people that live outside the city of Charlottesville that help advocate. I think for me, and I know we talked about my board structure is different than the typical nonprofit because my board is made up of the stakeholders that we serve. So all of my board members are low income housing residents. And so when I think about my accountability, it is very much my board members who are active participants in the programming. So I think when we think about accountability within the scope of Charlottesville, I think making sure that we keep in mind Charlottesville stakeholders. And I think one of the things that we like to, I'm not going to say harp on, but I think it's important when we look at accountability in the city is how and where we are putting the funding and is it the best use of the funding. So for example, there's a pile of money called CDBG Community Development Block Grant, and that's part of the way that FAR is funded, and that goes towards the programming that we do related to resident-led housing redevelopment, for example. And so I think making sure that the city is very specific and intentional about the funding that it gives out. And further than that, the impact that is done is really, really huge.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Hit it.
When it comes to the programs that are in the city, you just touched on something for whatever reason I thought about this. Is it one of those things where if I qualify for what I can get money from you for and I better my life, if it moves me from the low income housing to what would be considered middle class, and then I no longer am eligible to fit into your program, I actually end up in a worse situation than I was before I came to you. Because now I got a taste of what it's like to have housing, to get help, to get resources, to go to the middle class where there is none, and fall back to the beginning. So then you find people, especially mothers, because they're the ones in charge of the family, a lot around here because, there are broken homes that have to make the decision that I can only go so far in life because if I go any further, I lose everything. And if I lose that, then that puts my kids in a bad situation. So ultimately, you can find yourself breaking the law. Just so you can take a piece of the pie that you claim is for me that's going to end up hurting me if I take advantage of it the right way. But nobody is trying to develop any type of programs that say, okay, if you can come into housing like a lot of the lack of a better word, foreigners do, and utilize it the way it's supposed to be, to where you can then go get a house and go get other things. There are programs that say, okay, now since you did this, I'll graduate you over to this program. But if you do that, you lose everything. So why hasn't nobody found anything for that middle class that gets pretty much taxed harder than anybody else?
Mm-hmm. There is so much to unpack there. Oh my
I'm
goodness.
sorry.
I think no, it's not a bad thing at all. I think, well, one thing that I touched on earlier, improving the housing stock in Charlottesville is so important because that will take the quote unquote pressure off of needing to be able to scramble to find housing. Because in theory, if there were a lot more apartments that cost $800 a month, that would be able to accommodate more people. If we have more apartments that were $300 a month, there aren't that many, but that would be able to accommodate even more people, and that would take the pressure off because living expenses takes up most of my budget. That's all I can say. It takes up most of my budget. So I think that's one thing. I think another aspect is looking about how we view poverty and public housing in general. Because I know some of my residents, they want to stay in public housing until the end of their days because that's their home, that's where they want to stay. And I think that looking at how making sure that public housing serves the purpose of whomever lives in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but does a $300, $800 apartment look like a $300, $800 apartment in today's day and age?
What's that mean?
Well, this is the thing. If I tell you, man, look, I got a place for you to stay, $300, I'm automatically going to think that it's crime impoverished, roaches are everywhere, just because of the way society is now. Unless you tell me, okay, well, we're going to subsidize your rent so that it ends up at $300. So like, because at my mom's place, they got an acre of land, 3-bedroom house, ain't but $700. But you come to a place like City of Charlottesville, that same amount, I mean, it's a place that a lot of people are going to feel like they don't want to live there because something's going to be wrong. So that's what I mean by, is it looking like a $300 place? Is it looking like an $800 place because stuff is so expensive nowadays?
I think it really depends. And that's why I know all of y'all to a certain extent are following the housing redevelopment efforts that are going on. And I really think that once those are done, we'll be able to shift the narrative around what it means to have that $300, $800 apartment. So over at South First Street, there was a tour of the inside I did the other day, and they
the new places.
Beautiful. Yeah, the new places. And those will have deeply affordable subsidies. Same with Crescent Halls. That has been a long journey that I'm not going to go on today's radio. But at the end of that very long process, we're going to have deeply affordable apartments that are in that range or even lower for people who have less income than that to be able to afford, that are going to look beautiful. It's really going to change the narrative about what affordable housing looks like. And more than anything, like making sure that we, and I believe this, and I will say this radically so, that we give our lowest income residents the same quality of housing that higher income people have.
Absolutely.
Because we all deserve to have a place that is safe, a place that is affordable, and a place that we can sleep.
Yeah. If I could jump in here, if that's okay. So, hey, Shelby. Hey, girl.
Hi.
How you doing?
Y'all need us to leave the room.
Yeah, I know. I told you, Max on her B vibes this week. She beat out.
So, got some questions and comments and whatnot for you. I think that most everyone at some point has heard you address the leadership of the city and talk about housing stability and understanding that everyone understands the significance of it. But you need them to care in a different way. And so you may have touched on certain aspects of the answer to this question in your earlier responses, but I'm hoping that you can get really granular, because oftentimes what at least some people believe is that there's a request, but then the person that's making the request doesn't offer many recommendations or suggestions as to how to accomplish what they want, especially when you're trying to engage them in that process. And so I'm hoping that you can get really granular when you talk about, I need you to care in a different way. What is it that you specifically need from the leadership in Charlottesville at large, in order to move the needle on the affordable housing crisis here in Charlottesville?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is holding developers accountable. And when I say developers, I mean the people with a lot of money that can afford to build huge apartment complexes and somehow not build affordable housing to go with it. And when I say affordable, again, I want to say deeply affordable housing. When I say the housing that the residents that are in public housing can afford. So I think being very specific with developers. And I think the second part of that is really reframing the narrative around whose responsibility it is to build affordable housing. It is all of our responsibility to build affordable housing. And I think that just because something is not required by law doesn't mean it can't be done. And so I think if we were to make sure that every developer were to build an appropriate amount of affordable housing per apartment complex or whatever that they're building, I think that would take us a very, very long way. So that is those are my first two thoughts. I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
No, go for it.
Okay.
I'll interrupt. You want me to?
No, the
Go
next thing that I was going to say is that I know that there is some redevelopment taking place in low-income neighborhoods in Charlottesville. And again, really granular, because I think that people they want to hear the answers, is how far and its board and whomever else is involved has played a role in that redevelopment process.
So a few years ago, and this was before my time, before redevelopment even started, FAR did something called the positive vision. And the positive vision is saying, what do the residents want to see? What do they not want to see? And what can we say yes to? That positive vision document gave birth to a lot of the different redevelopments that are going on. So the first one is going on at South First Street, and that will happen in 2 separate phases. And so FAR helped to make sure that residents were in the planning process, making sure that they got to design it. So you will see that in phases 1 and phase 2. There's a similar process going on over at Crescent Halls. So the residents over at Crescent Halls were able to plan like, hey, I like that cabin, or hey, that doesn't make sense. I mean, last Friday, FAR, along with CRHA, the Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority, hosted a meeting, and the residents were able to say, this is how we feel about that washer dryer, or this is what we want this to look like. So that in essence, we are changing that power dynamic, because we know in the 60s and 70s that urban renewal was real and the power was taken away from the residents by the city. And so now what we're encouraging the city to do, and what they are doing, is giving the power back to the residents by making sure that they are in the driver's seat of redevelopment.
Charles, can we play devil's advocate? You and I for a second?
Always. Lord have mercy.
It's that time. I'm getting the rust off.
Okay, let me get my last thought in.
I want to know who the devil.
No, wait. Let me get my last thought in before devil's advocate. The other thing I want to share is that some developers have also shared with me why the residents planning this. And I think that we need to realize that everybody has their own level of expertise. Who knows better what to build over at West Haven, the West Haven residents? Same with 6th Street, same with South First Street and Crescent Halls. All right, let's
you ready?
Advocate.
Okay.
Okay.
Does it matter for the people that you're helping that are in low income housing, right? There are people who had everything stripped away from them and they never had a leg up to, so they need affordable housing. There's also people who have made decisions in their lives that made it so that they can't make money, that put them in that bracket. You don't decide that you help everybody, but as a developer, if I was to say, why should I have to build that amount of affordable housing? Some of those people made decisions that made it so that they can't afford more, or they, you might abuse drugs. It's a whole bunch of reasons why. So when they look at the number, I think that when I talked to a developer one time, he alluded to the fact that he didn't mind building affordable housing, but the amount that, say, Mayor Walker may have said, this is what you need to give, they were like, no, I don't want to give that much, because some of those people put themselves there. Some people didn't have any choice and got put there, and others put themselves there. So why should I have to build the amount that y'all are telling me to build when some of those people made choices?
So for me, and I feel comfortable saying this so far, we believe that housing is a human right, regardless of what you did to get there.
Gotcha.
And so I'm a firm believer that yes, you might have abused drugs, or yes, you might have quote unquote put yourself in the situation. But I do believe you are deserving of a place to sleep every day at night. So that is one. And I think I touched on this earlier, but someone described this work as philanthropic housing. And I think that tries to put the onus on someone else. We're like, you didn't make that decision, so now you go deal with it. I think a lot of us are born into privilege, and we have to use that privilege to help somebody out because we don't know the ins and outs of why people make the decisions that they do.
Yeah, especially when you don't know what they had to choose from.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if y'all don't mind, this is a great conversation. Let's go ahead and take a break, so we can pay these bills. But I'm just also going to give y'all a chance. If you have any questions or comments, hit us during the break, 434-422-9101. And we are streaming, broadcasting worldwide, IMHO Talk Show online, y'all. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Shelby.
Great ass.
Good question. Oh my goodness. My dad texted me. He said, you didn't tell me about the interview.
Yeah, but he listening though.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories. More people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible
1.3 Jams.
IMHO talk show, good people. Tell a friend, tell a friend. We are still here, still with you. You can stream us, you can listen on that 101.3 FM in the Charlottesville area, or streaming worldwide. Massive to the people.
Massive.
Yeah. Sir Charles, Miss Max, A.A. Ron Razor, and we are still here joined by Shelby Edwards from Far. Always good, insightful information. And this is for our Charlottesville affordable housing crisis special that we're doing today. So Shelby, I know I had something for you, sort of piggybacking off of what Razor was saying, and I know Aaron had something for you as well. But because you made a mention of something, and I think it's a misconception that a lot of people have, and I'm just curious of the dynamic, because again, we are talking about a housing crisis. So explain to us how you and your team handle the dynamic between folks who see that sense of community and see longevity in residing in public housing, contrasted with those who just see it as a temporary thing and they want to get out of public housing. Because I'm very curious on that bridge when we talk about affordable housing, is once they leave the public housing, then there has to be some resource and support for them to make that transition. So what's your thoughts around that?
A huge misconception is that public housing is solely transitionary, and that anything outside of that is incorrect. And I think when we make broad generalizations like that, we lose the nuance of building community. I know that I have several residents in West Haven in particular that love living there. They love having, their neighbors. They love the history of the neighborhood, and they also love the rights that come with being a public housing resident. There's a HUD regulation called 24 CFR 964. I'm not going to spiel about the whole thing, but it says that public housing residents have the right to organize. Now, how many people have the right to organize against their renter? Not that many people. And I think that for the folks that do want to stay in public housing long-term, who have a fixed income, that love the consistency of that, being able to stay in public housing is a huge gift to them. And I also just think more broadly that the government in many ways has failed public housing residents. I'm not going to go into the history of that right now either, but the government has. But I think there are many ways to continue to support folks who are in public housing by making sure that's resident-led and resident-centered, and making sure that resident-centered aspect means that if a resident does want to stay in public housing for forever, let them do that. Let public housing serve that resident. But if a resident wants public housing to be something that they live in for 3 to 5 years, their rent is going to be 30% of their income, what have you, that we allow them to transition when they deem it when they deem it appropriate.
How's that?
And
right?
are there transitional?
Oh, I'm sorry, Max.
No, I was just going to say any type of programs in place that are offered to all of the residents to be able to make that determination and then have access to resources should they choose to transition out of public housing.
Mm-hmm. See, this gets into a little bit more nuance than I think I'm prepared to answer, but CRHA is the actual owner of the property. We are more so the housing advocate. I will say within FAR's programming, we do have the FAR internship program, which is a paid civic engagement opportunity. And we work with CRHA, so the income that they receive from our internship program, it doesn't get counted for their rent because it really is a training program where we teach residents about who are your officials, what does it mean to vote, how do you organize, how do you make sure that you're being an effective community member. And each year the interns have a different project. And actually one of our interns this year, she's helping FAR start a youth program. So keep on the lookout for that. We're going to build the next generation of youth organizers.
How's that right though, Shelby?
How's what right?
I think you may have been thinking what I was thinking.
As a whole, okay, now help me, because like I said, I'm not that smart, so I'm gonna ask a crazy question. But
that's a setup, Shelby. Get ready.
She knows.
I know Max has my back.
It's called the banana in the tailpipe, y'all.
If public housing is set up for the public and it's meant to help those that have limited resources, how can you decide to stop off and limit the amount of public housing that the community can use because you're comfortable at where you are? And the government, and on the other side, how can the city not increase their public housing so that more people can do what you're asking? So when I say how is that right, I'm not talking about the people that want to stay there and be comfortable, but I am also asking, so if the city sees that and that has been brought to their attention, if the land can be built for these single family homes and these high rises, it can be built for more public housing so that the residents of the city can have a place to call home. Right? So that's when I say, how is that right?
I mean, I agree. I do think the city should play a larger role in paying for rebuilding the public housing, especially given it was the city's fault that Vinegar Hill was destroyed to begin with. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
not really, because
phrase it again.
Well, it's one of those things where somebody's gonna have to take ownership of something that's gonna hurt, right? Like, so if I'm comfortable at making $9 an hour and fitting the programs and getting all the benefits that come from, being in housing, I should have that right. If I want to use it as a stepping stone so I can go off and get my own single family home, I should have that right. But these developers say, okay, I want to come in and I want to add affordable housing to my non-affordable houses, right? We're running out of land. The city's footprint isn't growing. It's 13.3 square miles or something like that, right? And they're building up and they're taking places and they're taking homes from people and they're building additional things, but they're not really helping. I don't think anybody is really helping the residents have affordable housing, not what you do.
Just outside of
Outside, they're not helping. Like, I'm a business owner. I help myself. You know what I'm saying? I provide services. My smiles come at the cost of a hot dog, a hamburger, some French fries. You ain't buying that, I ain't smiling. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So I can be rented. You know what I'm saying? But when it comes to these developers, and they're not sitting at the meetings getting fussed at because they're trying to figure out, they'd rather pay $17,000 an hour for these lawyers to find loopholes so they can build this and make their own generational wealth for their own families. So if I got to give you crumbs, so to speak, and let y'all fight over them while I do X, Y, Z in the back rooms, that's what I'm gonna do. So the intentions of these organizations are good. Who's in control of them is who's in control of them. And we don't really have a name to put on those people. Even the last meeting that we had, the great guests that we had were saying, you know, we got a great president that's came into UVA and is doing X, Y, Z, this, that, and other, right? He ain't never been here. You know what I'm saying? Is it important enough for him to say what he's going, what his plan is? Or do I'm gonna give it to the boardroom and then y'all go out and y'all tell my mission? But if you tell it wrong, I ain't really held accountable for because I'm not the one that said it. These developers are doing the same thing. They're not there. They're not seeing what you need. They're not coming talking to your people and saying, look, what can I do to add value to your living experience? Because I'm going to build this anyway. They're not doing that. You know, email ain't none. So I commend y'all for what y'all are doing. I just wonder if y'all are on a treadmill. You know, everybody's moving, but they ain't going nowhere.
I mean, someone's got to make history.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I'm gonna fight right with you.
And I'm not going to pretend like there aren't a lot of questions we don't have the answer to, because I promise you we don't. But we do know that we are on the right track. And I think that, you know, once Crescent Halls is done late this year or early next year, same with South First Street, I think we'll be able to see maybe not even the light at the end of the tunnel, but it'll feel like we're making some distance.
Yeah. And Razor, the important thing for you, my brother, too, is that, because I get it, and I know Shelby gets it, because she you know, she's born and raised here. But it's like we are jaded, right? You know, because like you said earlier, Razor, like there's a rhetoric that's happened time after time. But somehow, like we got to keep an eye on the prize. You know, as our grandparents said, because it's yeah, like Shelby said, somebody has to make history. Right. So as long as we're holding them accountable and the plan is right and we see the needle moving, then I feel like we got to keep faith in that.
No, we got to keep fighting.
And I also think that, which I'm going to use this to segue, I also think that as organizers, it can be really hard to count the wins or the little wins because you're still focused on like that big picture. But I mean, look at, you know, the work my mom was doing like 10, 15 years ago.
Absolutely.
There was we didn't know what Crescent Halls was going to do, but we knew something needed to happen. And now 10, 15 years later, we're not where we need to be, but like I am of her likeness. I'm continuing her legacy, making sure that we're taking steps forward. You know, there's going to be Crescent Hall's going to be brand spanking new in a couple of months. So I think keeping track of that and also making time to celebrate wins, which leads me to on August 6th from 9 to 4:30. We are going to be having our 25th annual West Haven Community Day. It will take place over at 801 Hardy Drive. We have over 30 vendors that are coming to table and making sure that we are having resident-centered activities. There's going to be a moon bounce against my better judgment. I'm not a fan of moon bounces, but there's going to be a moon bounce snow cone machine. We have some amazing sponsors, which include, but are not limited to, Red Light Management, as well as Allison Partners and many others. We have a program book with the many sponsors we have. And we also have a food sponsor.
Yeah. I think it's called Order Up.
Man, get this dude out of here, man.
So like I said, those are not all of the sponsors. I'm not going to get myself in trouble by naming all of them, but please make sure to look out for our social media and read our program book. We couldn't do this without the support of the residents as well as the West Haven Community Day Committee.
Yeah, and Aaron got something for you, but I got to say, because you made me think too, like, you know, we as a people, like we have this thing too. And again, you know, like it comes from a history of trauma, but sometimes we don't appreciate like what we have and who we have until it's gone. You know, and me personally, I'm speaking on like whether you look at people like a Chief Brackney, you look at even like a Mayor Walker, like a Wes Bellamy, so on and so forth, because we have this trust issue, right, Razor? Where it's like we look at everything that's wrong.
That's right.
But then when they're gone, then we be like, yeah, like they did do A, B, and C.
Yeah, you don't miss your water to the well.
You know? But
no, I appreciate that. Make sure everybody goes out and goes to that particular event. I'm an income advocate because I'm in mortgage banking. So I think sometimes the arguments for public housing and the arguments for financing get a little convoluted and they cross hairs because I have had, you know, government services before, things of that nature. When I was young, I was on WIC, all of that stuff. But I'm an income advocate because
you look like you drank milk.
Whatever.
What kind of milk?
What does that mean?
Skim milk. He looked like a skim milk baby.
It's going crazy. But the reason why I bring up I'm an income advocate is because I always tell my clients that come to me for any sort of services is that, right, this is a stepping stone. So you want to start here, but the only way that you're actually going to be able to control your actual future is for you to put yourself in position to own something and things of that nature. And so I was very, very curious. I understand that that's not everybody's journey. What I want to ask you about is, what initiatives are there for our seniors in public housing? Because they are a distinct segment of the population that I'm extremely concerned for, because most people, let's be honest, if we look at the statistics, do not plan well for retirement at all. Most people actually end up in certain ways working until they die. And many of our seniors get put into the worst positions because their health starts to depreciate. Their income goes down because the government figures out a way, because we are not, as a community, I'm going to say this publicly, we're not educating our families properly on how and where to put our resources. So the government comes in and says, well, you can't have all that money. How are our seniors being protected in public housing to ensure that, because they're so vulnerable, that they should have housing? See, that's one of the things is that if somebody's going to have public housing, it needs to be the seniors, because their income years are gone. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And it makes me want to hit on a couple of points and start rambling, reel me in. So one of the things I'm really excited about is that we're working with, again, the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority. Home ownership is not off the table. So
Good.
one of the So one of the elements that we're working through with the 6th Street project in particular, we're having informal conversations about what does home ownership look like, and how do we make sure that the residents have the ability to own things too. Again, I don't necessarily have the financial specifics of what that'll look like, but that is definitely on the table as a consideration, which I'm excited for. Dude, we touched. Oh, go ahead, Max.
No, I was just going to say it's good to hear. I had a comment I wanted to make earlier, but I felt like we were transitioning out of the interview and I was going to let it go. But since Aaron pulled it back in, I'll go ahead and put it out there, which is that I have been a big proponent in the past of low-income housing being temporary. Only because of what the opportunities that it would give the resident to be able to, potentially live in a different environment or own a home and create generational worth and so on and so forth. All those things that can come along with home ownership. But I did hear your comment about living in public housing being, or low-income housing being, a right or a choice. I can understand that. I heard it a little bit differently today. I guess I used to work for CRHA a number of years ago, though, and so I saw kind of on the ground level what it really looked like for individuals to live in public housing and there be a lack of motivation. So being content with no work, being content not working, being content with receiving services from the government, being content with living in a certain environment, being content with, having certain things being directly accessible to your children, being, I saw what that looked like and how that really took people down, and just, created a lot of barriers for them to be able to pull themselves out of that. And so that was probably the main reason why I felt like this should be transitional. This should be a situation where you use it to get a leg up, to kind of get your life together, and then move on, so that the next person can come in and take advantage of the same type of resources. But, I do, and I think a lot of people may view this the same way that I did, but I do hear that it should be an option. I guess what most importantly matters to me then, if we view it the same way that Shelby just explained it, is that all of the residents are being given an opportunity to see what's out there, to see what the resources are, to get any help that they might need, whatever that looks like, mental health, whether that looks like help with substance abuse, or whatever the challenges may be in their lives. If they're getting access to what it may look like to live in other housing complexes or buy a home, and getting any help that they need in order to kind of function in their, just have the best possible quality of life, then I'm more content with them making a sound decision of whether or not I'm choosing to stay in public housing or I'm choosing to, move out and do otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Again, a lot to unpack. I think that one of the first things, also, thank you so much for your thoughts. I think one of the first things that jumps out at me is this being content and comfortability. And I think, again, embracing the fact that comfortability is subjective. Now, obviously, you can I'll speak from me. Moving out of Charlottesville and living in Chicago for 2 years helped me expand so much of what I didn't know. So I'm not going to pretend like moving someplace can't help. But I also have seen a lot of my friends get taken out of the environment where they felt comfortable, and it was detrimental to their physical and mental health. And I think that giving folks the autonomy to be able to make that choice for themselves, make sure that they are holistically ready. And I also think that making sure that we know that there are a lot of public housing residents that work, but are we making sure that the job market is paying people appropriately? Like if you work at Aramark, like you're only working when the UVA students are here, and then that's like a whole summer of not having work. And I know quite a few residents that live there. So Aaron, you said something earlier about seniors and generational wealth. Again, we go back to the to that having rights and accountability. And when you're a public housing resident, you have a lot more rights and accountability than you would in many other facets. And I think that is something that we definitely need to hold on to. I also think that I hear what you're saying about Black people and generational wealth. I think during the pandemic, I went through a lot of different things, and I was working in the arts industry at the time, and I was humbled, and I realized then what I had to do in order to retire comfortably. And I had nothing but time to get on YouTube. So I can only imagine, growing up even like 20, 30 years before I was born. And because listen, I already know I'm not getting Social Security. I'm a millennial. I do not think that program is going to exist by the time I'm 67.
Yeah. Somebody else got your check.
Okay. So I think, again, making sure that we all have a breadth of choices, and then the knowledge to be able to make those choices. And that's really the through line at FAR. It's making sure that we educate and empower our residents. We don't make choices for them, but we give them the tools. We empower them to be their best selves so that their outcomes are ideally the ones that that would be positive.
Shelby, before we transition, I know Charles might have a finish wrap up, but are there protections for seniors at certain income levels or at certain age levels to make sure that they are not removed from housing? Like, does that even exist? Because that's something I always wanted to know, is that how are our grandmothers, our aunts, our grandfathers, are they protected with public housing? Does the government have something to protect them?
So the way public housing works on a very general level is that it is a portion of your income. So if you turn 88 years old, you can't work, then your minimum rent is going to be something affordable, something that's reasonable. And it's not like, at least with this housing authority, you are owed a grievance. If you get like kicked out or you get an eviction notice or whatever, we have a current housing authority that generally speaking will work with you. We have advocates like FAR. In most cities, they don't have a public housing association of residents. They don't have a RAB or resident council. And so they can reach out to us. They can work with the housing authority right now with the current housing authority leadership.
They should do that also, Aaron, with like funeral expenses. Because, as you get older, and, I just buried my mom. Thank God she had insurance. Right. But let's say, for instance, thank you. If I had been in housing and my grandmother or mother passed away, I'm already at a deficit. So then now I got to bury her. And one of the mental aspects that I know can affect people would be the fact of is if I have to send them on to the next life with less than I want to. So if I gotta, cremate them when we don't believe in it, or I gotta pretty much put them in a pine box, that would have crushed me had I had to do that for my mom. If I was in that position right there. So now, not only am I the loss that you have right there, I feel inadequate, especially as a Black son, to have done that to your parent. Like it just wouldn't have. I think that's a program that we need to work on. Like if you can get into housing, there should be some money put aside that also helps give you a respectable burial.
Thank you for that. And Shelby, as we wrap up, definitely plug the event again and any other last words you may have.
Of course. So Saturday, August 6th is the 25th annual West Haven Community Day. It's going to be from 9 a.m. to about 4:30. We're so excited to have different performers. Like I said, we're going to have physicals. It's going to be a really exciting day to celebrate community and to celebrate all of the things that make, Charlottesville, but in particular, West Haven. And if you want to follow Far on Instagram, we're at Far Cville. That's PHARCVILLE on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Keep up with us and also our impact in the city.
Good stuff. Shelby, thank you. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
We're proud of you.
I'm trying. Support Black leadership. That's unrelated, but support Black leadership, y'all, in the city.
That's right. Until next time. Hey, fam, we're at the bottom of the second hour, so we will be joined. Don't want to miss it. We told you we got you, family. The mayor Lloyd Snook is next up for the last hour of the show. Tell a friend.
Hey, Charles, don't forget Solar Cville.
Yeah, can't
Saturday,
forget
August 13th, 5 p.m.
Plug it, Razor.
I have to, because Almighty will get on my last nerves if we don't. I love you, boy.
Hey, you see all these buttons I got, man. You got to have my back. So,
I got you.
Go ahead.
Hey, if it get bad enough, I got your front.
What else you got to say about it? You got it?
That's good. We mentioned it a little bit each time. Yeah. We just keep plugging it. Support West Haven Day. Support any organization that is meant to help the city, especially our community.
That's right.
The things that and then with Solar Cville, that's meant to empower you mentally. You got artists out there that you can support that's giving their all.
And follow them every day.
And follow them every day.
They're out here working for us.
Yeah.
Cool. So stay tuned, family. Much more show left. IMHO Talk Show.
Hey, we gotta hit a rest in peace, bro. Bill Russell just passed.
I know. I saw
who did?
Bill Russell.
Did he? Yeah. How was it?
80.
Russell was 150.
He was 80.
What?
No,
Thanks, Shelby. You can still hear me.
Hey, no.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, Black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More Black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that Black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially Black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles Razor, Aaron. We're here like we never left.
Did you mention Maxine?
Because the queen, Miss Max, is definitely definitely always a part of the show. But we're gonna hold it down for this one.
Oh, I got you. Okay, my bad.
So,
hey, look, I couldn't even catch him, Charles. I couldn't even catch him. He did it so fast.
The slow bus was rolling.
Yeah. No, you was driving.
I was driving. I was in the room.
And Lord, it's hard to laugh at it. It's like,
the classroom with two people there. I was just in it. So
no, it was the classroom of one.
My bad.
Yeah, Razor and I were in PE. You in class by yourself.
Oh, yeah. How y'all getting PE? How he getting PE?
No, we wasn't in PE. Charles was PEing on himself. I was in class by myself. I ain't going down with y'all. I'm back to my normal self.
Oh, my God.
All right, let's roll. Let's go.
Yeah, business as usual, as you see, Mr. Mayor. Business as usual. So as promised, family, we keep the hits coming. We are just delighted right now because since we've been on air, Razor, 2016, right, 6 years strong. We've had the privilege of being able to reach the heart of the city, right, in every crescent, and every nook and cranny, and when our next guest accepted the invitation, we were just so delighted because for one, we wanted to make sure that we were able to keep that line of communication open with the city, and so we're just delighted right now to have on the special today this focus on the Charlottesville housing crisis, none other than the current Cville mayor, Mr. Lloyd Snook. Mayor Snook, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And the way I want to start this, and as we said, of course, our listeners have chimed in, like they just want to know how your stint has been going so far on council and as mayor. Of course, there's some hot topics that definitely want your feedback on, in addition to the housing. But first, I want to give the floor to you to sort of formally introduce yourself for those who may not know your background, for those who may not know the work that you've done in the community. I want to give you that time to start off.
I appreciate that. I am. I always tell people I'm the old white guy in the room.
You are this time.
Certainly this time. But I'm 69 years old. I've lived in Charlottesville since I was 8 years old. Moved down here in 1961. My father was a professor at what is now the Darden School.
Okay.
And so I'm fourth grade in Venable School and going through Venable and then Walker and then Lane High School, graduated in 1970, went out to Stanford, spent 4 years at Stanford and 2 more years working as an investment analyst. And then I decided I did not get my jollies out of making rich people richer. And so I went to law school and University of Michigan, still Charlottesville, I was considered my home. Came back to Charlottesville. We got married. I married my wife, whom I met in law school. She was one of my law school classmates. Met her first about 2 weeks of law school. and we dated throughout law school. Got married on May 12th of 1979. Graduated May 12th, 1979. Got married May 13th, 1979. And then came down.
That's a busy week.
And it was a busy week indeed. And
it wasn't playing.
And my last exam was May 11th, 1979.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a busy time. I came down here, and I've been in private practice in Charlottesville ever since 1979. Sheila joined me in practice in 1989. She had spent about 8 years in the city attorney's office. We have 3 kids. We sent them all to Charlottesville schools, from Greenbrier to Walker to Buford to CHS. They're now grown and gone, and we have 1 grandson and a granddaughter on the way literally any day now. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. I am told that grandfathers get little granddaughters wrapped around their little finger, or vice versa. And so, we'll see how that goes, but I'm looking forward to it. But I've practiced law in Charlottesville since 1979. I started off doing death penalty defense work. It wasn't the only thing I was doing, but it was a big part of it, doing essentially pro bono work, where one of the important issues that I was raising from the get-go was the racially discriminatory application of the death penalty, including taking a case up to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1985, a case called Turner versus Murray, where we got a ruling from the court that reversed Mr. Turner's death sentence on the ground that the jury had been improperly picked because of failure to accommodate issues about racial discrimination and so on. So that's been an important part of my background. I do mainly criminal law, also plaintiff's personal injury law, also write a few wills, settle a few estates. So that's basically me. I decided in 2018 that I was going to run. In 2019, I ran for city council. In November of 2019. I've been on council for the last 2.5 years.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you for that. Thank you. So I think, just in the flavor of the show, before we get to the other topics, we can continue with the housing piece. So, there's so many questions and comments that have already come in for you. But I guess I'll allow you to kind of help us set the table. City council's role in this, and whether that be the history that is played that's led us up to now to what the goals are, right? And then maybe we could tackle it from there. But when it comes to a housing crisis, when it comes to everybody saying the cost of living in Charlottesville is too high, what's your approach as mayor and council? Like I said, the history up through your goal.
Okay, I think it's important to use. Maybe you ought to just use 2 different sets of terminology: affordable housing. Housing affordability. They sound like they're the same thing, but they're not. Right. Affordable housing means something under federal law and state law and local law. In terms of, we think of 30% of the area median income, or so-called AMI. 30% AMI is we're talking about housing that is affordable for people who make roughly $30,000 a year or less. Then we also have some 60%, 70%, 80% AMI, and so on. And that's how we measure so-called affordable housing. There is beyond that, though, a larger problem, what I call housing affordability, which is that even for people who are making 100% AMI, which would be 100,000 plus, or $150,000 a year, they can't find any place to live in Charlottesville either.
Exactly.
And we confuse the terms if we use the same term of affordable housing for both.
True.
So that's why I want to distinguish between the 2.
I appreciate that.
They're both important. The example that I give, and I went to Stanford. I know Palo Alto, California. Palo Alto is this example of what we do not want to become in Charlottesville. Give you an example. The median income in Palo Alto is $160,000 a year. The median house price to buy a house is $3 million a year. The median 2-bedroom apartment is $3,000 a month. It's 93% white and Asian. The Black people, the Mexicans, the Hispanics who actually make the city run can't live in Palo Alto. We don't want to be that kind of a city. We want to be a city. And I have to say, this is not a view that everybody adopts, but it's the view that council has adopted to say, we don't want to be that kind of a city where the people who make the city work can't afford to live here. We're headed in that direction, and we're trying to figure out what can we do to pull us back from that.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do, the only way, I mean, there are all kinds of other programs we can have, but ultimately the bottom line is you can't stop the rise in housing prices without having more housing. You just have, I mean, you think about law of supply and demand. We've got a lot of demand. We don't have enough supply. What's the answer? More supply. That means more apartments. It means more duplexes. It means perhaps smaller lot sizes. It means that you don't become basically, an entire city that is half-acre lots and single-family residences. And so what we've really got to do is to figure out what we need to do to tackle both affordable housing, the 30, 80, 50, 80% AMI people, and also housing affordability. They are related. There's a basic principle of economics that basically says, I'll give you an example. Let's say I can afford to buy a house for $300,000, but I can't find a $300,000 house on the market. I may go buy a $200,000 house and put money into it to get what I want, but that means that somebody who could only spend $200 on a house can't buy a house. And so that's why, we can talk about housing supply for the people who make a decent amount of money, but that's still going to have an effect, not a huge effect necessarily, but an effect on the folks who are in lower market classes.
So what brought on the change?
Well,
because it wasn't always that way.
Not at all. No,
I'm not from Charlottesville, and I haven't lived in Charlottesville. I just recently moved here, so there was a time where when I hear the stories about the Vinegar Hills and everything, so there was ownership for all people here. People actually had homes. So if we don't know, it hasn't been explained to me, let me say that, where the change came in. It seemed like I heard people use the default of, well, nationally, this is what's happening. But in order for it to be nationally, it had to start off in somebody's locally, right? So what was it that actually made the change to where the people who had homes couldn't have homes? Is it the taxes? Is it the repossession of houses? When somebody dies off and the name the ownership deed can't be transferred into one to another? I mean, is it because somebody didn't write a will? Like, what happened? Because if we don't solve that problem, regardless of how many homes or apartments you let in here, which homes could be condos, apartments could be condos so people can still have ownership instead of looking at it as a renter's nation, as Ann showed me. If we don't figure out what that is, we're destined to repeat it at a later date.
So in the 1980s, when I was on the Planning Commission back then, in the 1980s, we did a whole task force on the question of housing and home ownership. And the specific question was what could we do to increase the number of people who could own their own homes in Charlottesville? And what we really found when it came right down to it was the single most important variable was the population of the students at the University of Virginia. Because
UVA's name pops up a lot.
Well, and what happened was that, let's say, I'll take 10th and Page because it was the thing that the place we were talking about most at the time. 10th and Page was the neighborhood that's perhaps closest to the university. And mommy and daddy in Fairfax would come buy a house in 10th and Page so that their son and their son's buddies could live in a house in Fairfax and then in 10th and Page. And then they could profit from the natural growth that comes from owning rather than renting. And so we were trying to figure out what can we do that would stop that kind of speculation. And ultimately, the one thing we came up with, was what we called at the time R1A zoning, it's now sort of R1S zoning. The idea was still that we were going to have all these places down in 10th and Page used to be R2, meaning that they were places that could be converted into a duplex or some larger number of people without even having to ask. Just go ahead and do it. And so what that necessarily meant was, again, mommy and daddy in Fairfax could be buying up this house, splitting it in two pieces. Their son and maybe one roommate lives on one side, two other people live on the other side. Now you got 4 people contributing to the income. They can bid up the price. Right. And that's what was happening. And so we said, we're not going to let that happen. But what happened, and this is, I was on the planning commission from 81 to 89. After I got off the planning commission, we had started this ball rolling to try to change the zoning in that neighborhood. And it got distorted. Starting about 1990, 1991, the folks in Belmont and the folks in the Locust Grove neighborhood and so on were saying, well, you've got these protections to reduce the number of people who can live in a house. We want those protections in our neighborhood also. But the reason for it to be something we wanted in 10th and Page did not apply in Belmont. It did not apply in Locust Grove. But council went ahead and did it anyway. And I say I was off the planning commission at the time. They went ahead and did it anyway. And the result is that we've now got a situation where most of the land in Charlottesville that is even available for residential zoning is available only for single family zoning. And in most places in Charlottesville, you can't have a duplex. You can't rent out, for example, I couldn't rent out the basement of my house if I wanted to have somebody else come in to help pay the rent, for example. And so there are a lot of seniors.
You said certain parts of Charlottesville. Is that what you said?
Most of Charlottesville. Okay. So, for example, almost everything north of the bypass is R1 zoning. If it's R1 zoning, you can't have a second unit in there. Even though they have large lots, they have wide streets, they have plenty of room for parking. All of the things you would look at that would say, this is a place we could have more density, we're not allowing it. So
that was something against Mexican and Black people?
Not specifically. I can't say that that there is not a piece of that, because I will tell you that we've been getting all kinds of nastygrams from people who don't want us to allow more duplexes in their neighborhoods, who have basically said, we're all in favor of density, but over there.
Can't be dense over here, right?
It can't be dense here. It's okay to build up Friendship Court. It's okay to build up West Haven. Just don't build up Blue Ridge Road.
No, so they believe in segregation.
I'll
say it for you. No, that's my job. That's what I do. Yep.
And so that's what we get into. And I've tried to say to them, do you realize what you sound like? And even I'm the old white guy in the room. I ought to be able to have this conversation more easily with them, but I'm not.
Gotcha. So, and what you're saying, like, that's more about the development, though, right? Because to my knowledge, there are folks who own their property and then they rent out downstairs or a room to people.
Well, there are a few places where they can do it because it's been done for so long. It came before the zoning ordinance.
So grandfathered in.
But most places, like most of Greenbrier, for example, you can't do it.
Gotcha.
There are a few places in Greenbrier that are set up as duplexes, but only a few.
Yeah. Now, a comment that I heard you make earlier about the current council is stopping it from going the direction of being like Palo Alto. So, but isn't it true that that we're already there? Isn't it true that the majority of people who work at the number one employer here can't live here and don't live here in the city? So aren't we already there?
We're headed that way. Palo Alto is more extreme. Okay. I want to make sure we don't go to the extreme. If it's possible to dial it back, that's great. But at the very least, let's stop the bleeding.
Lord, I would think that I have to kind of side more with what y'all said, only because we recently moved here and we started looking at where we're going to have our kids go to school. Now, it was looked upon one time that inner city school, let's say CHS, would have had more crime than, say, at Albemarle. So now that Albemarle tends to have more, on paper, more crime than Charlottesville, it sounds like people were forced to move from Charlottesville, and whatever issues they had within the city, they've taken to the country. So just because it's not at the extreme doesn't mean it's not there, so to speak.
Well, I agree.
So at that point, there's no Band-Aid that's going to fix the issue, because it's already the tipping scales. By the time that we recognize and say, okay, this is Palo Alto, it's not going to reverse. So what is it that we can do to cut off the lifeline for that type of ideology? Who do we go after?
I am less interested in the ideology than in the practicality. Okay. If we can get the practical details right, the ideologues are just going to have to suck it up.
Okay.
And so what that means to me is that we've already basically said in our future land use map, and just to make clear, last year, 2021, we agonized over the future land use map, which is only about 3 pages of our comprehensive plan. But it's also the prelude to the rewrite of the zoning ordinance, which is taking place this year in 2022. What I'm hoping we will come out with is a zoning ordinance that says every place that is currently single family zoning, we will allow up to 3 or maybe even 4 units on that property. So you can take your house and you can turn it into a duplex or a triplex or however, as long as there's going to be some restraints. For example, it's still got to be sort of a house size thing. You can't have, suddenly you're going to build a 10,000 square foot house and you're going to divide that into 4 pieces. The example that I always look at and cringe is it on Booker Street. There's this huge house over there that somebody built, and they got the brainy idea that what they were going to do was have a huge house because it was R2. They were going to have a huge house and they were going to have one kind of penthouse on top. And they would live in the penthouse and they would rent out the rest of this big old house, probably to just a whole bunch of UVA students or something. Well, the neighborhood took a look at that. I'm sorry, I got a frog in my throat I can't get rid of today. Neighborhood took a look at that and said, this is atrocious. This is ridiculous. They've got this huge structure there and it's completely out of character of the neighborhood. And then finally sort of shut down on the construction of it, and they decided not to go that way. That's an example of how somebody is trying to game the system in the wrong way. We want to make sure that, and this gets back to what's sometimes called a form-based code, a zoning code, where we basically say, if you've got something that pretty much looks like a house, same size, same dimensions, same height, everything else, if you've got something that looks like every other house in the neighborhood, we really don't care whether you've got 2 family units in there or 3 family units in there. We care if you have 10 or 12, but 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. If you can divide your 3,000 square foot house into 4 750 square foot residences, cool. So the idea is that we're going to have more density. It's going to look very similar. It's not going to change the physical characteristics of the neighborhood. And if we can do that by allowing that basically everywhere in the city, then we're going to be able to get more people who can live in cheaper places.
I think Eric got a question for you.
Okay, right. No, I appreciate that. So I'm actually happy you brought up the California example, because I think many times many cities in the United States, and these guys know where I'm going, it's like they think that can't be us. And like, as you said, you're kind of right there. But one of the examples that I think most people in this particular area need to look at, that's a pretty similar example, not only Palo Alto, but also San Francisco. San Francisco is basically unaffordable for the people that live in that city. But one of the main issues that happens in these cities that I think we need to be aware of is the level of homelessness that comes with it. And particularly homelessness on the level, it affects the most vulnerable populations. And in our country, created to be a permanent underclass. That's the Black population and your Black citizens, and also particularly Black males are affected tremendously by homelessness. Has there been a concern, or has there been some sort of implementation and discussions that you and the council have been having, or just the leadership, about being really serious? Like, hey guys, these cities that we kind of, and not you, but these cities that Charlottesville might say we would like to model ourselves after, there are these overwhelmingly other problems that we have real life. Like, you can go online right now and see San Francisco and see Skid Row and see 50,000 people living on the street. That's real life, real time. How are those discussions in those rooms that you guys are talking about? This is what comes with this when being in a city like this. This is what comes: the homelessness, the poverty, our citizens leaving this particular area and not being able to even work, and then employers losing good employees. How are those discussions, and what things can possibly be done to implement?
Well, so the problem of homelessness is sort of the third leg of this, in addition to the affordable housing affordability piece. The people who can't even afford to be in anything,
right?
And that's the homeless population. Of course, it was probably 10 years or so ago, we built the crossings at 4th and Preston. There was a proposal to build what we've sometimes branded Crossings 2 that hasn't ever gotten quite off the ground. We've got it used to be a hotel, the Premier Circle out on 29 now.
The proposal you said that never got off the ground, is that something that can be brought back, or what was the reason that's been? Is there a particular reason that's been held up? Is it been zoning, funding? Well, we cut checks for everything else.
Well, builders coming in every day.
But that's something where it's basically state funding that kicks us into the doability. And
is it limited to state funding though? If it's not limited to state funding, it can be added on to something that the builders would have to do in order to contribute to help the city that they plan on making revenue from, I would think.
At this point, we don't have, let's see, the ordinance that we've got does not allow us to, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. We have a zoning ordinance that allows us to give people, to give developers the ability to build and to increase the density of on the parcel. In return for that, they have to either have affordable units on the spot, or they have to put in a fair amount of money into a fund. The ordinance does not allow us to just pick out any amount of money and say, okay, we want $1 million here. And I don't know the details of how that's going to get rewritten, but everybody has recognized that that's an ordinance that isn't working.
So they can just pay the fine and then do what they want to do.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
And the problem is that what you call the fine is
what you call
it? Well, it's a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund.
Smell like shit.
Whatever you want to call it, the amount of money that we are allowed to charge isn't enough to make a dent.
Okay.
And so part of what we've got to figure out is whether, if there's not going to be any state funding, for example, to go into the Crossings 2 proposal, where are we going to find that money? And we're talking not 1 million, 2 million, we're talking 10 million or more. And so that's an issue that we haven't figured out. We've got a couple of people who are supposed to be working on it. We've got it's now the Blue Ridge ACA, Coalition for the Homeless or something. We've got people in city government. I know Ashley Marshall, Deputy City Manager, is really working on that and trying to figure out what we can do to bring resources together. But from council's perspective right now, I want to get the zoning ordinance fixed. And so if we can get it fixed in this rewrite that's happening right now, then maybe we can give ourselves some power to make some people do some things we want to have happen.
Okay, that's very important because we're about to break it, but I wanted to sort of close the housing conversation. We can get to the other topics on the other side of the break. But I wanted to try to wrap it up with you giving us like that big picture, and I think you alluded to it. It sounds like that may be sort of number one on council's list, like to tackle right now when it comes to housing. Because I'm curious, when you're talking about permits or rezoning, even like closing the loopholes for developers so that the ones who are making money hand over foot have some sort of stake in subsidizing, or whatever you want to call it, affordable housing, instead of it being something like dirty market and then right behind it, and we were talking about 10th and Page again, and right behind it there's luxury condos, so please let us know, like besides what you just mentioned, sort of like what does that picture look like for council right now, like when we think about those things that we need to address, like whether developers, zoning, whatever it may be.
Well, again, the part of the problem is that the zoning ordinance, as it is written right now, doesn't give us very much room to maneuver with them. It does not allow us to say, okay, you have offer, and I'll give you an example of the specific thing that ticks me off. We will say you can do this project, but you've got to have 3 units in there that are going to be affordable, and that would be affordable for a period of 10 years. Well, if you figure out, first of all, affordable for 10 years isn't really much, because 10 years from now, those units go back to market rate, and then what have you got? You got nothing. If you do the math in figuring out return on investment and all this kind of thing, it's a rather detailed calculation, but depending on the amount of money, the percentage or rate of return that they think they're going to be making on their project, it turns out that there's just not that much difference between making something affordable for 10 years and making it affordable for 30 years. And there's not that much difference between making it affordable for 30 and making it permanently affordable.
Okay.
And so, but we don't have the power right now to insist on more than 10 years of affordability.
Is this considered a crisis?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, then the pandemic should have shown us that y'all don't have to go by all the rules set in stone. When the pandemic hit, they made all kind of rules and regulations where they passed out money. So if this is truly considered a crisis and not just a word attached to a situation, then you bind it by anything.
Well, except that we are still bound by state law. And state law, what happened with a lot of the money we were handing out through the CARES Act and the ARP and all that other stuff, the federal funds, it's federal money, not state money, number one. Number two, because we're a Dillon rule state, where we can only localities can only do what the state government has allowed us to do in the way the state government has allowed us to do it. We can't do things that go against the state law. Virginia is probably the strongest Dillon rule state in the country in that respect.
Sounds like we need to petition for an amendment.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Now, the issue there is that the Dillon rule, if the General Assembly wanted to, the General Assembly could abolish the Dillon rule tomorrow.
That's what we're always talking about.
They won't. And the reason is because it means they lose power. And they're transferring power to the localities, and they don't want to do that.
So and who we got vote out?
All of them. I will tell you, Sally Hudson and Cree Deeds are right with us on this. But it's it's mainly Republicans, but not exclusively Republicans. An awful lot of Democrats say the same thing.
Yeah. So there's nothing. So, but I still feel like that there's council can handle like who they allow in, especially like with development. Like I feel like there's more that could be done locally from at least that regard.
Well, I'll give you an example, a very specific example of a project on Monticello Road. This is something that is still a hot topic. It came up first time in 2019 when a developer bought up an apartment complex and basically threw everybody out because he was going to redevelop it into something else. And when it finally came before council in 2020 on the project that he wanted to put in there, there was so much opposition. in theory, we're not supposed to base a zoning decision on we don't like you personally. We're supposed to base it on, you don't have enough sidewalks or something relating to the site. But there was a lot of opposition, and a lot of folks wound up saying, basically, we're going to find a way to say we don't like this project. Well, okay, so it got voted down. Came in a year later, same basic place, new owner. People said, basically, we're voting you down, kind of because it's still a bad taste in our mouths from the year before. Project has been changed again, is now made more affordable units and so on in this particular version. And it's going to be coming back up again for a vote in August. And we'll just have to see whether they've sweetened the pot enough. But that's a situation where within a limited range of what we're allowed to do, and there really is a very limited range of what we're allowed to do. Within that limited range, what can we do? How much can we push? And that's the issue.
Hey Charles, just so I make sure I understood both of y'all, that you're bound by the state, a lot of the state rules that keep you from doing things, right?
Correct.
And UVA is a state organization, right?
Correct.
So while we're trying to fight for to be able to do or be able to say, because UVA is a state organization, they're not bound by the same things that you are, and they're able to buy up and make changes.
Well, and particularly what happens is when they buy up land and they're owning it as the University of Virginia, we have no control over what they do. So I'll give you a thing that's happening right now is in the area between Emmett Street and University Avenue, where, along the railroad tracks, Ivy Road, where they're putting this new school of data science and so on. And there's going to be a hotel there, and there's going to be a conference center, and all of the businesses that used to provide income to the city, tax revenue to the city. The tax revenue is gone. We're going to be losing a substantial amount of tax revenue. They're going to get to do anything they want to do in that space. And we can't stop them from doing what they do in the space. About the only thing we can actually do with them right now is to hassle them over their connections to the water and sewer system. When they come off of their property into the street, then we've got some control over what the situation is. Now we can't just be arbitrary about it and say, okay, we're going to charge you $1 million for the sewer connection. But well, we really can't.
I know. I'm just teasing you, right?
But that's the limit of what we can actually control. We will not be able to say to them, that's a mighty tall building over there. You really ought to cut that down to size.
Right.
That's not one of our options.
Y'all gonna have to raise taxes, aren't you?
Probably.
That's sad. So while we're saying that UVA is here to help, they're doing things that force city council to make the people that you are your constituents your enemies, because you have to figure out a way to be able to take care of the city.
Right.
But ain't nobody saying things like that.
Well, let me say this year we raised the real estate property tax by a penny. Plus, of course, there was about a 10 or 11% reassessment increase. We did not cut the car tax at a time when car assessment prices were going way high. We raised the meals tax by 0.5%. We didn't raise the lodging tax. That's about the only thing I can think of. But that's an example of finding a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there to get to the point where we could finally say, yes, we could build the Buford School project.
Is city council able to raise based on the income threshold? Or does it have to be across the board?
Has to be across the board. We are allowed to do something which we changed over this year. This is sort of a funny story. We had for a long time had this tax relief program that actually we weren't doing right. We were not doing it the way the state law allows us to do it. And I had asked, when we were being told, oh no, we can't give any more tax relief than what we're doing, I had asked a group at the University of Virginia Law School to come in and take a look. And these two students came in and looked at every statute that we had, every law we had. And they said, well, you're not doing it right this way, but if you do it under this statute instead, you can give more tax relief to more people and you can base it on income.
Okay.
And so that's what we're doing now. And because of bringing in the UVA students to get a fresh look at everything, we've now figured out a way to give tax relief to, I don't know, it's probably 100, 150 more people than we were going to otherwise.
Yeah. So I mean, lastly, real quick before we switch gears, I mean, there seems to be a refresher right now with current leadership, with President Ryan and folks that are in place. So what's the relationship like there when it comes to council working with the university?
Pretty good. I have to say that the thing that concerns me is that Governor Youngkin has appointed 4 people who are not on the same page, and he's promised to appoint 4 new people each year. And so by 3 years from now, we may not, actually by 2 years from now, we may not have a board of visitors that we can do business with. So if we can make some agreements like real quick and get them implemented like real quick, we may have a chance to use that goodwill. But we've got a situation where there's some people on the board of visitors who are locals. LF Payne is a local, Jim Murray is a local. These are people who know Charlottesville, who care about Charlottesville, who want to see Charlottesville do well. We need to be making these agreements right now.
Yes, good stuff. So, family, we're gonna take a very quick break and come back to close out with Mayor Snook. And I see the questions and comments, so we're gonna try to bundle them up and do a little rapid fire as much as we can. But it's a IMHO talk show, y'all. Stay tuned. Tell a friend. Tell a friend.
Good job. I don't know why my voice is so froggy today.
Maggie Gutenheimer.
IMHO talk show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO talk show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO talk show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO talk show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening.
IMHO talk show. Last 9 minutes of the show. I'm gonna try to try to bundle these up for you, Mayor, to try to get through this. And let's see. So one is the Black community directly, right? how do you feel the city can create a better relationship with the Black community? What does the city need from the Black community? You know, do you feel like that y'all are listening when the community is talking? You know, or is the community missing something that they should divert their attention to that would help this relationship? You know, the one thing I say about that is that it's quieter now, right? You know, it seems a little quieter. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Well, I think it is, and here's why. You know, in the radio business, you know what I mean when I'm talking about signal to noise ratio. Okay. We always had signal going on for the last few years, but the noise outweighed the signal. And now the noise level is down and the signal is coming through. And the signal, I mean, we're able to spend more time on things that actually produce for people. And when we can, for example, get the university people to come in and tell us how we can reform our tax relief program is a good example. We've got a lot of stuff that we're doing right now on the zoning thing that is technical work. And if we're spending all of our time worrying about the distractions out there, then we're not able to spend the time on the technical pieces to get it right. So the challenge, I think, in dealing, if you want to talk about the Black community, the first thing is to recognize, surely I do, and I'm sure you do too, that the Black community is not a monolithic thing.
Absolutely.
That there are an awful lot of different Black communities, communities within the Black community. And many of them already have a good way of reaching us. Some of us, frankly, don't. And how we go about getting everybody a chance to communicate with us. I mean, one of the things that I've tried to do is make sure I'm out there in the community as much as I can be. People know me. People will come up, and they're certainly not shy about telling me what they think. And I've had people, you know, come up to me at festivals and things like that, and just lay into me. And that's fine.
Comes with the territory.
Yeah, it comes with the territory, and I'm not afraid to defend myself, but I'm also not afraid to just sit there and listen, because I know that there are things that I don't know. And I'm happy to hear them.
Yeah. So what about the resources? Is also being asked. Like maybe like what's at top of the council's agenda when it comes to providing certain resources? Like we just had Shelby Edwards, you know, from FAR. So you know that's just one example. But what are some ways you feel like you can, you know, more so engage resources within like community initiatives?
Well, one of the things that we do that allows for resources into the community is something called the Vibrant Community Fund. And it's a way that nonprofits can try to get money from the city for doing certain things. We're trying to redo the Vibrant Community Fund process so that more entities, more nonprofits can participate. There's also going to be a big pot of money, probably about $1.8 million, that is going to be made available through federal funds that will also be available for nonprofits to do certain things. We are going to try to create and try to institutionalize one of the ways that we keep getting asked for money. People ask us, you know, can you give us a certain amount of money to help with this festival or this street event or whatever? And we don't have a fund for that right now, but in this in the upcoming budget, we're going to. And we're going to say, let's say it's $50,000. I mean, it's not to say we're going to spend all $50,000, but at least somebody can say, okay, I now know if I come to council or if I come to the city manager's office, it doesn't even have to come to council, but we've got a budget line item for it. And so we've had requests recently of people wanting us to give a certain amount of money for this or that or the other thing. And council's answer is always, we don't have authority without it being without showing up in the budget someplace. So let's put it in the budget. Give you an example. West Bellamy, when he's putting together the Tonsor basketball league.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yep.
He came to us and said, "Can you give us $7,500 because we want to have we need $7,500 to make our budget work?" And we looked around and said, "Well, we don't have a budget for this." But I called up the folks at Parks and Rec, and they said, "Well, tell you what. we'll buy his jerseys for him.
Right.
And all he's got to do is put a Charlottesville government logo, Parks and Rec logo on the jerseys.
Right.
And that's $8,000.
Yeah.
So we got him his $8,000 to solve his budget problem. But the important thing was we could find a place where we had the money allocated.
Right.
So we need to have some things like that. We're going to get those set up. Same kind of thing a few months ago, something at the Jefferson School. They wanted some money. But we didn't have a budget item for. Well, we found it. We found a place to put it. We're going to find a better place to put things like that.
Yeah. So, all right. So another thing is A12 that's come up. Do you personally think that the city should do something in commemoration of A12, and how so?
Personally, I do not, and I'll tell you why. I think what we ought to do is what we have been doing, which is to enable other people to do things for A12. The reason I say that, let me give you an example. I was approached recently by the deputy chief of mission of the Israeli embassy in Washington, who wanted the city of Charlottesville to have some kind of event around August 12th that talked about anti-Semitism. Well, for those of us who were here on August 12th, that event was about black and white. It wasn't about Jews and Christians. It wasn't about anti-Semitism per se. But when people started talking about, after the Buffalo shooter a couple months ago, and he had this big thing online, he was talking about Jews will not replace us. And all of a sudden, the national public attention was brought back to the Jews will not replace us from Charlottesville 2017.
Yeah.
And so he wanted us to basically join the debate on the anti-Semitism piece of it. But if I did that in Charlottesville, people look at me like I was nuts, because that's not the way we perceived it at the time.
Yeah.
And so if we try to tell what any of us thinks is the story, we're going to get a whole lot of people pissed off at us, which is one of the reasons I really like Amos's proposal to put the pictures up in the mall, up in the trees on the mall, and people can put their cameras on the QR code and then hear from the person in the picture that person's own experience. So we will have 15 different experiences of A12 put out there, and not just one sort of city approved version. We've also got photos that are a photo collection down at the Virginia Holocaust Museum in Richmond. We've got a photo collection that's starting up. I guess it probably has started up by now at the Small Library Collection in Charlottesville, the University of Virginia. At Ix Art Park, there's going to be a 3-day set of events over there. Daily Progress has got something going on. There are a lot of ways that it's going to happen, and it doesn't have to happen from City Council.
Right.
We can permit it to happen. We don't have to compete. We don't have to take over the space. We can say, y'all go do it. We're great. All behind you. Let's do it. But it doesn't have to be from us.
Yeah, and unfortunately, A12 has become such a talking point, and people have gotten away from what actually happened. But last minute. I don't know how you gonna wrap this one up. But Chief Brackney, there was a lot of questions about that in regards to how is council looking for anything different, because the chief seemed to be, doing a lot of what the community wanted. It was what was even asked for when she was hired. So what's your approach right now? Did you understand the lawsuit and things going on, but what's going on with Chief Brackney right now? And would you consider rehiring Chief Brackney?
Well, let me say this. She has sued me for $10 million. She sued me for $10 million. Supposedly I did in fact say this. It said that the problem that we had was that a lot of the people that she had hired were also among those who were quitting. And I said that even some black women officers had quit. That got me sued for $10 million. That's essentially true. So my lawyers would probably tell me, don't you dare say a word. But I will say this overall. Chief Brackney, there's a basic premise that to be an agent of change, you need two things. You need a vision of what that change is going to be. And you need the ability to attract and retain a team who can implement that vision.
Right.
Chief Brackney, I'll give her credit for the vision, but we know that she was having a real problem trying to retain people. And we can talk about whether it was just the good old boys or just what, I don't know what, that's the sort of stuff that gets me sued for $10 million. But I will tell you that the one thing we do know is that she did not have the ability to attract and retain a team in the 3 years she was here that could implement the program she wanted to implement.
Do you feel like she had the support to do so?
She had the support on council to do so. She had the support in the city manager's office to do so. Whether she had, how she managed things within her own department is something that I don't know as much about, but I do know that she did not have the support within her department.
Gotcha. Mayor Snook, thank you.
Sure.
Thank
Glad
you.
to be here.
And we look forward to having you back now.
Yeah, you know where I am.
All right.
You got my email address. All right.
So Razor, you feeling good, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
Okay.
Miss Max, Sir Charles. Thank y'all, family. Hopefully we did it justice talking about this affordable housing. And stay tuned. IMHO Talk Show. You can re-listen to the episode as well. You know how we do on Sundays, y'all. You already heard Chucky Hayes. Next up, Cleve Logan and the Soul Lounge, y'all. Till next time, IMHO Talk Show.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Let's can we get a picture?
Absolutely.
All right, you can open it. We'll get it out there. Some hair.
Thank you so much.
Good talk.
You get a picture real quick?